You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Round, joined by Bryson Carbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game in Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Before we dive into the episode, a little self-promotion. Stop what you're doing. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap. Join the discussion on our Facebook group. We have over 2,500 members. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Panthers on Tap. The Panthers have wrapped up their introductory press conferences with the new general manager, Dan Morgan, and the head coach, Dave Canales. Before we get into everything tonight, just want to throw out some things for you guys, some housekeeping. We had put out a Panthers giveaway. I think it was at the end of last month. You got to follow us on Twitter. And if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube right now, hopefully you're subscribed. But if you have not yet, hit that subscribe button because that will enter you into a jersey drawing of your choice. Of course, it's got to be a Panthers jersey. But we're going to wait until we hit 500 subscribers. We're at like 370 at right now at last check. So once we hit 500 subscribers, we will pick a name from that drawing, and we'll message you guys, and a jersey will be on your way. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Bryson, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to completing that giveaway. You know, it's kind of been moving a little slower, but yeah, I mean, if you're on Twitter and you're participating in the giveaway, then retweet it so more people can see it, and then the giveaway will be completed a lot quicker than longer. So, but in regards to the presser, it feels like we've been here before, right? This isn't a new feeling for us.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and I had a tweet that kind of went a little bit viral. It was included in a Riot Report article, and I unapologetically, Jesus, if I can talk tonight, will buy in every single year for the Carolina Panthers, year after year. It doesn't matter how hard I get. I'm going to buy in, and I'm going to believe because I'm a fan and I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that's the way I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw my tweet. I took a very even keel step back approach. I think it was the effect I'm not getting bamboozled again. I'm not going to be fooled again. And I thought there were some really good things said in that press conference, and we'll get into those in a little bit here. But I'm just going to take a step back approach, and let's see what they do on Sundays before I jump to conclusions on anything. Because we've, again, like we said off the top, we've been through this way too many times over the last couple of years. And there are things, it gets exciting when, something new comes in and there's change, but I still need to see the results before I jump to anything. But we got a guest for you guys this evening that we want to bring in. He's been on this show several times. Edgar Salmengo, you guys know him as Panthers analyst on Twitter. Edgar, it is good to see you.
Hey Curtis, hey Bryson. Good seeing y'all. Also, thanks for having me on. And Bryson, you could credit me for putting you in that Riot Report article with your amazing tweet.
Hey, all right. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Edgar's big time now. Are you writing for them like monthly now, weekly? Like or is that just periodically, or what's the?
Yeah, they'd asked me to fill in here and there, so you might see more, you might see less, who knows? But because there happens to be a heavy off season or a heavy dose of news this off season, and I've been like really plugged into the whole GM and head coach search, they asked me to like lend my insights, and I was happy to do it.
Well, they couldn't ask for a better person because you are very insightful on Twitter in the little 120 characters, whatever the character limit is. So people are going to be treated for that because that you got good stuff. But let's talk about the press conferences for a minute. Start with Edgar. What were your main takeaways? I think we're all going to say, we need some dogs. I mean, that was like the headline. But what did you take away from both Dan and Dave?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Dave, and maybe if you could allow me to be like contrarian a little bit. I know that now that I'm not on Twitter, I'm not limited to 160 characters. I can kind of like contextualize some of my thoughts. One of the things I know it got viral, and even myself, I got kind of wrapped into the whole dog thing. And it's like, oh, who's a dog? Who's not a dog? Is Brian Burns a dog? That kind of deal. But then the more I thought about it, one of the things that I think people in their hearts want to cheer for Dan Morgan. He was a former player on this team, most tackles in the Super Bowl. came back to Carolina. So there's a fondness to him. But there's also on the other side, on our other shoulder, the devil on our shoulder is like, dude, you were responsible for this roster, or partially responsible. And some could argue even like more responsible because his friend was Scott Fitterer for putting this roster together. And so, I was thinking about it, like just looking at drafts because I'm a draft nerd, a draft geek. I was like, you know what? I know people have different opinions now, but just thinking about when they were drafted, like Ike Ekwonu, you could have said that he was a dog. Like the way that he did his run blocking is very dog-like. J.C. Horn, Jonathan Mingo. So like I feel like I'm tired, again, being contrarian. Like I don't want to hear that we want dogs or that we need this mentality. It sounds good. I want to hear that. But I think we want talent. I don't want 53 dogs that don't know how to play football, right? Like, let's look at last year. They got Jamie Robinson, and he, of the draft class, people thought that he was the biggest dog of all five because he had a really great interview, talked about how he had a chip on his shoulder for being picked so late, but he didn't really contribute much last year. And so I do want that those types of players, that culture where people fear the logo, where people feel like you're going to be punished. The team is physical, but I think at the end of the day, I think you said it earlier already, Curtis. Like my takeaway from Dan Morgan's press conference is like, you're telling us everything we want to hear. Now just show us. I don't even have to hear from you. Just show us on the field the roster you can put together and prove it could be a winning product. Because like what Bryson said, we've heard this for so many years already. So they could say whatever we want. I'm going to go get T. Higgins. I'm going to go get Mike Evans. I don't want to hear anything anymore. I just want to see the results.
Bryson?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Edgar. Of course, the dog mentality of wanting that on the team is something positive, but you got to have talent. Like Edgar said, we have the players that have that mentality of being a dog, when they're on the field, but the talent level just hasn't been there, unfortunately. And is that coaching? We're going to find out this year if that's coaching or not. But I think being a fly on the wall in Dan Morgan's interview would have been extremely interesting. I would hope that he would have had to bring proof, or them know already, David Tepper and everybody involved in the interview process know already that he had some either disagreements with Scott on this roster in certain areas, whether that be free agency or draft, because it has been a complete blunder in almost every area under Scott Fitterer. His big thing was in on every deal, and he lost every single deal almost that he was involved in. So it's like, where was Dan Morgan at throughout this whole process? And that's where I originally, when it was announced, I think a lot of Panthers fans felt the same way. It was like, wow, you're coming off the worst season, probably the most disappointing season in Panthers history, and you went down the hall and you hired the guy right next door for the replacement of the guy you just fired. And like Edgar mentioned, they had a really good relationship. They were best friends, spent time in Seattle together. And even Dan Morgan talked about him in his presser. So I want to see results as well. But I'm always going to come at this with a fan perspective of believing. And I'm going to believe until they show me that they can't do it. So I'm a little different in that aspect. I think Dan Morgan can get the job done. I think the showing that he had in his presser with the players coming out and supporting him, Jonathan Stewart, Thomas Davis, these legends in Carolina, showing the support for Dan Morgan that really we haven't seen for one specific person in Carolina for a while. And then as far as Dave Canales goes, I think the biggest takeaway is one, he should do all the speaking. Dan Morgan is the best public speaker. I can relate to that. Dave Canales is more of the kind of preacher. He has, I think his spirituality plays a large part in his life. I think he's very open about that. And yeah, I think the collaboration, being on the same page with one another, like you mentioned, I think you mentioned it, Curtis, hiring a GM and a head coach in the same cycle for the first time in like 20 years is something that hasn't happened in Carolina and for a while. So I think being on the same page with Dan Morgan having a relationship with Dave Canales prior and them knowing what each other wants is what's really most important moving forward in Carolina, because we can't have this back and forth of like somebody mentioning that they wanted someone on their draft board and, I got vetoed on that one. We're going to talk about later. I can't fucking stand that guy. But I think being on the same page and really the collaboration is what has stood out to me from that presser. And I'm excited about that moving forward. I do want to see results. Of course, I want to see results. But I'm going to believe in them until I can't anymore.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I took away was alignment. I think they said it about 25 times in that press conference. I obviously want to see that, and I think there is clearly alignment with Morgan and Canales' ties in Seattle. Um, Something really funny. Dan Morgan like didn't blink in the entire press conference. It was crazy. Like just staring like I mean,
He's
that guy
locked in,
was
baby. He doesn't
so
have time to blink.
focused. I hope he's that focused when he's looking at prospects in the draft because they really need it. But that was something I just thought was worth mentioning. Um, what I did want to throw out there, because Ricky brought this up on Twitter, and I thought it was hilarious because when I was, for people that don't know, I work in TV, so I was actually producing this live for our newscast when it happened. We took it live on air, so I was listening to it in our control room as it was happening, and he kept when he mentioned dogs, Dan Morgan, and he started tallying off like Steve Smith and Julius Peppers, all these guys. He didn't mention any current players. And I don't know if that was because he didn't want to put a foot in his mouth for later if, like something doesn't fall through. But I thought that was like when I was listening to that live, I'm like, I hope he mentions a current player. I hope and he didn't mention one of them. And I was a little shocked by that. And I don't know if he just didn't want to marry himself to these players, and fans will look back like, oh, he said this guy was a dog. Why isn't he signed him to a contract? But I thought that took me a little bit back. That was my first reaction. I know Ricky pointed it out later on. And I kind of wish he would have, because it seemed like I don't know. I wish he would have, put some stock into this current roster a little bit. It was evident to me that Bryce Young was a pretty big reason why Canales took this job, which was good to hear. I think that's what the Teppers wanted to hear too, as well. And what you're going to do to fix and complement what he did at Alabama and bring that to the Panthers and what we haven't seen last year. So I thought that was really good to hear. But it's all great. Like, I thought a lot of the things that they said were great, but again, I want to see the results. I want to see it happen on Sundays. I don't care about the talk at all. And it all sounds great, but they need to get results, and that has not happened for this team. And that's the approach I will continue to take. I thought it was interesting. They definitely didn't want to touch anything with Tepper with a 10-foot pole when it came to questions about his involvement. I've listened to Canales now a couple times on the radio as he's doing his media tours this week. And anytime that is brought up, he has basically said that's in the past. I have not dealt with that, and we're moving forward. And I mean, I guess that's the way you kind of got to approach it, but that still lingers in the back of my mind of how much involved the Teppers are going to be when, what if shit doesn't start off great this upcoming season and it's a really slow start? I know he was given a 6-year contract, and they've preached patience more with this new staff. But when stuff doesn't go right, is Tepper going to go back to his old ways? And that's my biggest concern with all this. And I know he was asked by the beat reporters if he had any comments, and he I think it almost came off jokingly. He kind of chuckled and was almost being a smart ass about it and said, no, I'm taking a step back now. You guys want me in the background type of thing. So I don't know if he's changed. I don't think he has. We'll see. I mean, we'll see what the future holds here, but that is still in the back of my mind. And then just one other thing. I just wanted to talk about a really powerful moment, because I don't think enough people mentioned it. When Canales paused and talked about his wife, I'm almost through that entire book now that he wrote. If you guys have not read it yet, it's an outstanding book. And I think, Edgar, you're the one that put it out there on Twitter.
There it
I
is.
think it was, yes, This Marriage question mark. I got it on the Kindle on my phone. So I've been reading it on my phone, and I'm like 130 pages in. It's $170 or whatever. But reading through that book and seeing that moment in the press conference, if you've read the book, and seeing when he paused, and it was a good probably 5 to 10 seconds where he didn't say anything. Reading that book, I think you kind of knew what that pause meant, like how deep their relationship is and what they've been through all the trials and tribulations. Just hats off to him for that, because that was a really powerful moment if you've read that book and got to see that. And I thought it was worth mentioning, because that is not easy to share stuff like that. And for him to go out there, both of him and his wife, to put that in the book, I definitely recommend reading it because it's a really good one. But yeah, that was kind of my key takeaways from anything. Anything else you guys wanted to jump in on?
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the topic, I think it was easy to tell one thing about Dave Canales, and that's his compassion that he has for other people. I think that he knows that this job as a head coach is more about just X's and O's and putting different things on the field. It's about the relationships that you have with your players. And I think that a lot of players have talked about that, like Mike Evans and Baker, and their relationship they've had with Dave throughout their time with him, and even former players from Seattle. So I think it's easy to tell that he does value those relationships, and I think that might be a change in Carolina that they haven't had. I think Frank had a pretty decent relationship, but Frank wasn't good at setting boundaries, it sounded like, and kind of let players walk all over him. And David sounds like he's a compassionate guy, but also knows how to, be stern when he needs to be. And I think that's easy to tell from that presser just from day one. This is a guy who genuinely cares about people and wants people to be put in the best position to succeed. And he's not stuck in his ways. He's willing to change on the fly to put anyone in a successful, position to succeed. And I think that that's really important, especially in Carolina, when you have a lot of players who have been kind of square pegged in a round hole. And, even on his, like you mentioned, his media rounds, he's talking about, we're going to do, our offensive line they're going to be what they're good at. It's going to be, we're going to figure out what we're good at and we're going to do that. We're not going to have this zone run scheme or anything specific, like my way of doing things. Is going to be what we're good at. And I think that's exactly what Carolina needed.
Well, yeah, and I think he's genuine, he's real, and he doesn't fake it from just what I've seen so far. And I think, Austin Corbett kind of reiterated that in his takeaways after the presser to the media. Edgar, anything to add?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, he's hailing from Harbor City, California and Carson, California, which is some great neighborhoods to come from. Just really authentic, genuine people come from those neighborhoods. And so I just want to affirm that. But just all seriousness, one thing that also resonated with me, not to duplicate what you said, because I think all the authenticity and genuineness, like I agree with you. But another new slant I thought about too is like, this guy wanted the job. This guy wanted to be the head coach. Remember all that talk about we all wanted Ben Johnson number one. Does he want to be the leader? Like, is he the leader of men that we think? Like, yeah, he could draw up plays. Like, yeah, he's a wizard. Yeah, he can get chunks of yards whenever he wants. But like, does he want to be the leader? But when I get that feeling from Dave Canales, is like, this is what he wants to do. There was a line in the book near the beginning, and I know Curtis, you saw it, but he said about being a leader. It's not about being ready. It's about just being the person to step up and do it. And so we've heard all off season, who wants this job? Who wants to be with the Panthers? Who wants to be with Bryce Young? Like, he's a short quarterback. Like, someone has to like him to be. No, they got a coach that wants to be the Panthers head coach. He wants to be the quarterback coach for Bryce Young. Like, I feel so confident, in addition to all the good things that you said about Dave Canales, but I feel assured that like they didn't get, the second-rate coach that, like, oh, we're the Washington Commanders. We got to get the last coach available in this musical chairs. No, they got the guy that wanted this job. And like, I just feel maybe he'll be successful, maybe he won't, but at least at this point in time, I feel confident that like, I know he wants this job and I know he wants to take Bryce Young to where he can be.
And I mean, that represents what he did in Tampa Bay. Like, no one wanted that job. I mean, everyone was like, who's going to take this OC job? They had Baker and the other guy that's escaping me, yep, Kyle Trask, and no one wanted it. And then he came in and, look what they did last season. So I think you've seen that not just with Carolina, like he's done that time and time again.
And with the quarterback, so Baker Mayfield, we didn't want Baker Mayfield. Nobody wanted Geno Smith. It's like, nobody wants this job. Nobody wants this quarterback. Give it to me. Like, I'll take care of this opportunity. And so, like, I tweeted something about, like, miss me with those guys that, like, oh, I want the perfect quarterback. I need to have cap space and make the team who I want. Like, no, give me a leader that's going to coach a team, not someone who wants to wait for, like, the perfect opportunity. So, like, it just made me more confident in the choice of him as the head coach.
Well, let's talk about a guy that Canales spoke pretty highly of in that press conference, and it has really been all but confirmed at this point that Ejiro Evero is sticking with the Carolina Panthers. You guys know me. I love everything about this. I think there's so many not just him, he's a hell of a coach. He's going to be a head coach, I would think, in the near future. It's beneficial because he brings continuity to this team defensively, and something that Canales doesn't really have to worry about as much, and he can solely focus on the offense. And it helps these players. I mean, the team, I felt like outperformed themselves this past season with all the injuries. And, players that really have struggled in the past, I thought he kind of built them up. I thought Dante Jackson had his best season as a Panther under Evero. And, guys like Troy Hill, I mean, he was bringing guys off the street and they were playing at a high level. So I think that is huge and beneficial. I also think it's beneficial to him because Evero hasn't had a defensive coaching stint where he's been back-to-back years in a team. Like, he went to Denver, was there for a year, and then he left, came to Carolina, and then everyone thought maybe he'd be gone after this year too. So, like, he kind of gets to build off of what he did this past year, which I don't think a lot of us have been able to see yet with him. So I think that is beneficial to him when he's trying to become a head coach. And then the other side of it, whether you want to say it's a nasty business or not, there's a comp pick waiting when he does become a head coach. And I think that was probably pretty big reason too. It was why Carolina wanted to keep him. We see what the 49ers doing. I mean, now guys are complaining about how the 49ers structure things and, getting picks and complaining about it, but that's just the way it works. I mean, Carolina needs every advantage they can get. So if they can get a comp pick like this, I mean, they obviously got to make a good pick out of it, but I think that helps as well. But your guys' thoughts on Evero? Sorry, I got a little long-winded there. Evero returning to Carolina.
I think we're all fans of him. I think fans are fans of Evero. One thing that came clear, we talked about with the press conference, we know for a fact, being an authentic, genuine person, that Dave Canales really wanted Ejiro Evero. So I'm glad he's coming back. I still can't help but I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I want to kind of put things into context, right? And so I think players, fans, Dave Canales, we're all happy he's back. But the only person I don't know who's happy he's back is Ejiro Evero. It's the only person. So just give me a quote, give me a soundbite, give me I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to work with Dave Canales. Once I hear that, I'll feel much better. But we haven't heard any official release, any official thing from him, or even just from the team. And so that's the only piece that's gnawing at me. But outside of that, obviously I want him to stay. I want the continuity. Our defense has been picked apart. We had the Phil Snow defense. We had somebody from pre-Phil Snow. We've got Evero. So just to have 2 years of a consistent system that the players know about, makes me happy. And obviously it helps that he was very productive last year. And, having an offensive head coach who said dude, Evero's defense was so hard to scheme against, that he has the chops to do it. And I wouldn't trust any other defense. The names that were being floated out there, I trust the defense to Evero to be that coach, to be that manager, to be hey, my players believe in me. They believe in the scheme. We can be productive and let's run through a wall. I believe he's a really good defensive coordinator. If the defense falls off next year, it would be because of the players, but I don't think it's going to be because of their defensive coordinator. So outside of that, I'm 99% happy. Just want that 1% to say Evero to say oh, I wanted to be here and I'm so excited to work with Dave Canales, and then I'll feel great.
Yeah, I agree with you, Edgar. I was kind of on the same page. I didn't want to force someone to take a job just because they're under contract. If you're not happy and you're bringing, that vibe into the building every day, I'm stuck here because I'm under contract. I got blocked from other interviews and I didn't want to be here, but I'm here because I have to be. I'm not sure that's something that really sets you up for success for a new coach coming into a building trying to change the culture. But I don't know that for a fact. I would imagine that Evero did want to stay, hopefully. And, he was just exploring other opportunities and ultimately led him back to Carolina. I'm sure he really wanted a head coaching position. I think he deserves one and he will get one in the future. We will be losing Ejiro Evero at some point in the near future. And, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad he's back. Obviously one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, a bright mind, players love him. I just hope that he loves Carolina and is happy to be back. That's the biggest thing for me.
Do you really think though he's gonna try to tank to be like, to have this, like, he wants a head coaching job. It's in his own benefit to have this defense succeed. Like, I don't get the worry about that from people. Is like, the guy is still going to come out here and coach. It's not like he's going to tank this season defensively so that he can screw over the Panthers because he didn't want to be here. Like, he's going to fight to try to get a head coaching job. So I don't know. I don't see the concern there. And teams block lateral moves all the time. It happens. I don't feel bad about it. I don't.
Yeah. I guess for me, it's like, it's not the perfect scenario, I guess. So it's not like I'm down. I'm not super worried. It's more like you got Dave Canales. He's bringing on this coaching staff, this new culture, this mentality. And so you'd love to see something. We talked about this already, alignment, right? So you'd love to see your defensive coordinator and your head coach to be like, hey, we're simpatico. Maybe he'll still kill it, right? He'll still kill it on defense and he'll still do a great job. And maybe they'll still do well, right? It's fine. But like, again, the ideal situation, my preference is not like it's going to mean anything, but like you'd love to see like Canales and Evero on the same page and like everybody like going all out because those two are like the offensive and defensive minds of this team. And I'll also say, it's hard because what if, and then this is just playing scenarios, playing hypotheticals, just something bad happens in the middle of the season. And then you have this rift because Evero could say like, oh, I didn't want to be here. Or you hear these rumblings, or we had to hear these rumblings these last couple of weeks. Like, is Evero coming back? He might be interested. And so like, I just don't want to hear, I don't want an expose from the Athletic saying, oh, this is what happened. Like, I would love like to go through one season where like everybody was on the same page and we were good. But like, if something were to go wrong, like this could be one of those like loose threads that nobody like cut off at the very beginning. Is it a big worry? No, it's just something in the back of my mind.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he's going to, because he was forced to stay in this situation, come in here and tank. I think he's going to do his best no matter what and be a professional, because I think that's the kind of person he is. But I think it just goes back to the tone in the locker room and kind of just making sure people are happy in their positions that they're in, because I think when you're happy in your job is when you do your best work. If you're in a job that you hate and you don't want to be there, you're not typically putting out your best work, even if you don't intentionally do it. So that was my only worry. I do think obviously getting him back is good. Like I said, I think he's going to do a good job. I think he's a professional. He wants to be a head coach. So he's not going to, call bad plays or put players in bad positions on purpose, but it's just the tone and building the culture and hopefully not getting to a situation like Edgar mentioned of, there being a rift in the locker room and players, we wanted Evero to be head coach and we got Canales and Evero didn't even want to be here. It's just things down the road that we've seen these situations play out in Carolina before. It's been an unhealthy organization ever since Tepper bought it, even before Tepper bought it with some things with Richardson. But yeah, I mean, we're just hoping for the healthiest situation possible. And I really hope that is the case. I think it's more likely than not the case, but there always is that thought in the back of your mind.
Well, let's talk about a key player to the defense, J.C. Horn. So the big question, and Bryson, I know you jumped all over this really last spring during the draft time and really after it. And I'm curious to see if your position has changed. So we'll start with you on this one. But so J.C. Horn, his projected fifth-year option is $11.29 million this year. And I believe that, last year you said you would not pick it up. So seeing that the number, again, this is projection, it could be a little bit higher, it could be a little bit lower. Would you hesitate or would you pick this option up at this point?
So for the Carolina Panthers organization, with the roster that as it is currently constructed, I think they have no choice but to pick up this fifth-year option. When J.C. Horn is on the field, he is an elite cornerback, and there's no denying that. J.C. Horn is a very good player, quote-unquote dog, as we've talked about. But, of course, his availability has been lackluster in Carolina. He's really put this team in bad situations, not any fault of his own, obviously. Getting injured is not really anything you can control. But I think for Carolina's situation, yes, they should pick up the fifth-year option. They should bring him back. He's one of the best players on the defense when he's on the field. You just hope that he can continue to stay healthy and play, because when he's on the field, he takes away half of the side of the field. I mean, he is a lockdown number one corner. I don't doubt his talent whatsoever. It's just that, the availability has frustrated me, and Carolina has been put in some pretty tough situations throughout the years with his lack of availability to the team. So back then I said no. This year he was available, towards the end and played really good ball. And I think you have to re-sign him and bring him back and hope that he's able to play a full season for the first time in his career in Carolina.
Edgar, are you picking that up?
Yeah, I mean, like what Bryson said, they almost have no choice. I'm a big fan of J.C. Horn. Every time he's on the field, I mean, Bryson already mentioned it. Like he is that player, and so you want to invest in that talent and hope he stays on the field. I'm just looking at the top salaries for cornerbacks, just like cornerbacks you'd pick up on free agency. We're looking at people like Adoree Jackson, James Bradbury, Dante Jackson. Like that's the cost. Like if you want to let J.C. Horn go and pay somebody that same amount of money, like that's the type of player that you're getting. And so you almost want to invest in the possibility of J.C. Horn being available and he shows up. And if he doesn't work out, there was, we would rather have the potential of J.C. Horn than a mid cornerback. And so I'm a big fan of J.C. Horn. I bought his jersey from Ross, so I want him to be successful and stay in the Panthers, so my investment stays clean. But on the field, I love how he he's just the defense looks so different when he's on the field versus when he's off the field. And so if you were in love with Evero before, when he gets J.C. Horn, it's just even better than that.
I love the Ross shout out. I can't get over that shit.
keeping it real.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's risk involved, obviously, just with his availability, but I'm picking this up. I thought it was going to be more than this, to be honest with you. I thought it'd be in the 13, maybe even 14 range. So, I mean, yeah, I'm looking at the contracts right now Dante Jackson's getting 11 mil a year right now. So, I mean, just based off of that and some of these other contracts looking across the league, I don't think this is too much. Again, there is risk involved. Obviously, there's risk involved in any contract you're giving out. So just pray that he can be healthy and, just have longevity for this team and also, build off that and hopefully get some sort of extension out of it. Because I do think we all can agree that when he's available, he's probably a top 15, top 10 corner in this league. He's a hell of a player. He just has had some really bad injuries his first couple of years in the league. All right, let's have a little – go ahead.
Just one more thing. I forgot to mention this at the very beginning, but even though I was so down on it sounded so negative on Dan Morgan, I do have one silver lining about Dan Morgan. And that is he has a different running mate than Scott for next year. He'll have Brant Tillis, the former Kansas City cap wizard contracts person. And so in addition to us talking about J.C. Horn and all this stuff, I'm all in on trust Brant Tillis, the cap god. Let's just, if he decides this is the best or he's going to work something magic or whatever, there's no one else I trust more than Brant Tillis. And so even though I'm kind of down about Dan Morgan and his philosophy and how he built this roster, I have some sort of semblance of hope that he has somebody that has been in a championship pedigree franchise that's coming in to help work the cap magic that we've been waiting for. And maybe that's why our talent and our roster has been so terrible, is because we haven't had someone that knows the loopholes or knows how to keep really good players at a reasonable cost and be able to add more talent instead of being up against the cap.
All right, let's dig into the past a little bit here. So the NFL Nation, ESPN reporters, a la David Newton for the Panthers, did a redraft of last year already. I know it's ridiculous. And again, I'm not saying this, we should go back and do that. Let's have the conversation, have a little fun with this. But they did a redraft. They took Carolina picking CJ Stroud at number 1. I believe Bryce Young went to the Titans at 11. So Bryce Young's dropped all the way back out of the top 10. And then they picked Josh Downs in the second round over Jonathan Mingo. Mingo wasn't even picked they did only the top 64 picks. So they only did the first 2 rounds, but Mingo wasn't even in the top 64. So thoughts on this? I know we're playing with fire here and I'm sure people are what the hell? Why are you even discussing this? Cause it's way too, but why not? Let's have some fun with it. What do you think of this, Bryson?
Yeah, in a vacuum, if you're just going off last season and that's it, I completely understand where they're coming from. I mean, obviously Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons ever in NFL history. Um, but even Stroud himself in that interview he did on I think it was the Pivot podcast, talked about the situation Bryce Young went into, and I think he said something to the fact of I talked to Bryce and I told him he's the one and he's the one for a reason. And I think even just that belief in a player of Stroud's level really cements the fact as to why Carolina took Bryce Young number one. He was the consensus number one quarterback. There was very few teams that had anyone else above Bryce Young, any player in the draft above Bryce Young. He was the number one player. And I think that in a vacuum, if you're just going off last season, then I think this redraft makes sense, I guess. And you take in Stroud because he had better stats. But when you talk about the situations they were in, the coaching that they had, the amount of talent that they had around them, obviously I think Stroud's numbers would look different in Carolina than they looked in Houston. And then we're doing a redraft again at this point. And then why didn't Carolina take the consensus number one quarterback, Bryce Young, who led the Houston Texans to the playoffs? You know how crazy that would sound. So, I mean, it's fun to talk about, but I am far from being sold on Bryce Young, like sold as to move on from Bryce Young in Carolina. I wholeheartedly believe he's the franchise quarterback in Carolina. We saw glimpses of it. He was in the worst situation in football with the worst coaching staff in football. And he, tried his best through adversity, never blamed other players, never pointed fingers, never said, my coaches, they put me in that. He always manned up and said, this is on me. I got to be better. And I think that that's really important for a leader of a team as a franchise quarterback. And I know he has the talent level. He's been a winner at every single level of football that he's played in. He's going to be a winner in the NFL. Just a matter of time and getting the right situation surrounded with the right talent, with the right staff. And I think that is coming to fruition in Carolina.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for Bryce Young, this season, it really tested him mentally. Like I don't know if he's ever really been tested mentally like that before. And I think that will be beneficial. And I think Peyton Manning even kind of uttered those words of this season will be really, looking back in 10 years, will be very beneficial for his growth in the NFL. Edgar, I want to approach this a little bit differently. Do you think Stroud would have been as successful if he was in Carolina? And then vice versa. Do you think Houston would have had a, kind of a similar season with Bryce Young at the helm?
I think I'm more confident that if Bryce Young was in Houston with Bobby Slowick and Nico Collins and Tank Dell, that he would be successful. But I am more confident that if CJ Stroud were in Carolina, the season would turn out differently, right? And so I know we've already talked about it to death about all the circumstances that Bryce Young had to face. But like, I if I had to bet, I bet like Dave Canales would turn to Bryce Young and say, and maybe I'm colored because of the book, and I know Curtis, you read it, but like I feel like he would say, "Hey, Bryce, this happened for you. Like this turmoil, these challenges, these struggles, we can't change the past, but I think it happened for you, and you're going to come out better than ever because you had to be put through the fire." And so, part of me, I know I'm fanboying. I know I'm going to be called a Bryce sexual here, but like I think he has the mental makeup to like survive what happened. Like I feel like a mere mortal would have gone through. I mean, look at us three as fans. Like we're at our wits' end surviving the season. Imagine being the quarterback, having technically 4 play callers and 7 or 8 different left guards and right guards. Like all of us already are so upset, and he's the quarterback, and he like weathered the storm. And so I know I'm a fanboy, but like if I had to redraft, and like this is the season that you're going to win to, like I kind of want to trust in Bryce Young to be able to survive that. As opposed to not say CJ Stroud can't do it, but like I have a lot of faith that Bryce Young, because he's already done it, that he could have survived like such a nightmarish season that we experienced last year.
Very well said. Let's move entirely to a whole different topic, and we're going to end on this. We're going to end on a guy that, who's just not people aren't a big fan of around these parts. Matt Rhule. So he just continues. He's like the ex-girlfriend that just keeps popping up. So he was at, I don't know how this came up. I didn't see the full interview, but he was at a press conference. I think it was today or recently. And somehow Carolina came up, or Brock Purdy, I'm sure with Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl. And Matt Rule said this is quote, when I was in the draft room in Carolina, I brought his, Brock Purdy's name up and I said, hey guys, he should be on that draft board. And he got vetoed on that one. And he said, you can ask Coop, his DB's coach. He continues about Bryson. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe it at all? Do you think it's bullshit? And what do you think of Brock Purdy in Carolina?
Yeah, what I think of Matt Rule is the total opposite of what I think Dave Canales is. I think he is I think he's disgenuine. I don't think he tells the truth rarely ever. I think you could see that verified through his time in Carolina. I don't believe this whatsoever. I don't think that he brought this up and was vetoed. I think it was well documented when he was in Carolina, he had control of the roster. So if he really wanted Brock Purdy on that board, Brock Purdy would have been on that board. I don't believe this. I wish he would just stop bringing Carolina up. Move on, man. I don't get the obsession. You were terrible. You failed during your time in Carolina. David Tepper was patient with you. I think that's something that's a little overshadowed. Matt Rule had time, but he regressed through each season. The roster got worse. The team got worse. The record got worse. And Matt Rule was in charge of all of that. He had the final roster say. I think, again, that was well documented. And I think that this is just another showing of Matt Rule and the kind of person he is, and someone that wants to cover his own ass and try to make himself look as good as possible when in reality, the mistakes that were made were his, and he just doesn't want to own up to it.
I will say this, and we were talking before we hit the record button prior to the show, and Bryce and I were talking. I don't think this is entirely he's lying about this, because one key thing about this is he's saying that he should have been on the draft board. A draft board is a plethora of players. Like, I think Carolina had over 100 and some, or 200 some. So for him to say Purdy should have been on there, I don't think it's as significant as if he would have said, I think we should have or I wanted to draft him. So I think there's some, you can try to read between the lines of what was said there. And then also why I kind of, somewhat believe this is Joe Person quote tweeted, I think it was whoever posted the video, and said that he also had heard this a couple times, that Purdy was or Matt Rule had mentioned Purdy. So I do trust Joe and his judgment, and he's, broken a lot of things. So I do think there might have been some truth to it, but I don't know if that would have changed the situation. And honestly, I don't think Purdy would have thrived in the situation with Matt Rule and the guy, Ben McAdoo, who's now in New England, because he was the OC at the time. So I don't even think it would have worked out. But anyway, Edgar, thoughts on Matt Rule and his infatuation with Brock Purdy?
Yeah, just to affirm Bryson, this tells us more about what he didn't say than what he did say. This is a narcissist. This is the guy who has to be right at all times. He's the guy that tweeted during one of the playoff games that oh, that's why I preach. That's why I preach not to
reach over the goal line.
Reach over the goal line. And then and that same weekend, Dave Canales is talking about winning each day, and Steve Wilkes is saying hey, things are happening for you when doors are closed, something opened, right? And it's just dude, I'm so glad this negative energy, this I have to be right, just wash clean of all that negativity and all that narcissism, and just feel good about yourself, And so it told me a lot without him saying anything. And then the other thing I thought about was man, that quarterback situation, this was only 2 years ago, right? They already had Sam Darnold. They already had Baker Mayfield. They traded up for Matt Corral. What are we supposed to do? Get a fourth quarterback and things would have been different? I'm pretty sure if he was on the board, it wasn't going to be higher. And so it just more evidence to me that this roster evaluation, especially at quarterbacks, was just wrong and just bad. And I'm just happy we have Bryce Young.
Yeah, I like to throw gas on the fire every once in a while. That's why I'll quote tweet them every once in a while, just to get everyone fired up a little bit.
If you want engagement, Chris, just say something about Cam Newton, and you'll get all the engagement you want.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Edgar, I just want to thank you for coming on. We appreciate it and appreciate your time. I do want to give folks a heads up. we are going to be taking a couple of weeks off here. So we'll probably start back up towards March, and just throw out some dates for you guys just to keep in mind. So the combine's coming up the 29th. We have free agency starting March 13th. So keep that on your radar. And we're going to take a couple of weeks off here. This is kind of a dead zone right now. And then we'll pick things back up. And Edgar, hopefully we'll have you on closer to the draft too, for our all-important mock draft that we do for the second round, pick number 33 and on. So hopefully we can get a couple right here. I think we hit on Young and we hit on Zavala, and that was probably about it.
It's our annual tradition. We can't miss it.
But I'll tell you what, maybe they should have listened to us, because I think we had some other picks in there that might have been better off than what the Panthers did. So, but again, thank you, Edgar, for coming on, and we appreciate it. And we'll definitely get you back on here soon.
Yeah, appreciate y'all too.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Panthers on Tap podcast. You can catch your episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap for all your analysis of breaking news. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, which would enter you in for a chance to win a jersey of your choice for the Panthers. And as always,